They used to call me the ugly high school graduate, like it was some kind of official title. My classmates said it, teachers whispered it, my own family embraced it like a goddamn slogan. At least she's smart, my mother would say, whenever someone flinched at my face, my hair, my body, whatever they decided was wrong that day. At 18, I didn't even know what being pretty meant. I was too busy trying to survive in a house where my older sister, Savannah, was the princess, my younger brother Grant was the golden boy, and I was the one they posed behind the family during pictures. Just stand in the back, Harper. Don't ruin the aesthetic. They really said that, out loud, in front of guests. My graduation day should have been my redemption. But the moment I walked across the stage wearing the dress my aunt patched because Mom refused to spend real money on something that wouldn't fix your face, the crowd snickered. A girl in the front row whispered, "Oh my God, she looks like an extra from a horror movie." And what did my parents do? They smiled, clapped, took pictures of Savannah in the bleachers instead of me. That night, they didn't even come home. They took my siblings to a steakhouse to celebrate the real achievements. They left me alone with a freezer pizza and a note, "Don't wait up." 2 weeks later, they kicked me out. "We're helping you," Mom claimed, while tossing my thrift store suitcase onto the porch. "We can't keep supporting someone who refuses to improve themselves." Improve myself. As if I were a broken appliance. As if my existence cost them too much oxygen. Dad didn't even look at me. He stood behind Savannah, resting his hands on her shoulders like she was the one who'd been exiled. And then he said the sentence that replayed in my head for 10 years like a damn poison loop. "Some people are born disappointments, Harper. It's better you learn now." I left with $87, a suitcase that didn't zip fully, and a heart that felt like it had been crushed under a cement truck. I promised myself one thing. If I survived, I'd never let any of them near me again. But life is messy, and fate is a bitch who loves to laugh at promises. 10 years later, they came crawling back. And trust me, they didn't recognize me. They didn't even come close. But we'll get to that. For now, let me tell you how the darkness rebuilt me. How the world that threw me away became the one I eventually owned. I spent my first night homeless behind a gym, hugging my suitcase like it was a life raft. I didn't cry. My tears had dried out years before. Instead, I used the only asset I had left, my brain. I marched into a 24/7 internet cafe, used 6 of my last dollars for 1 hour of computer time, and applied for every night shift job within a 50-mile radius. I wasn't picky. If someone needed toilets cleaned or boxes hauled or floors scrubbed, I volunteered. By morning, I had 3 interviews. By the end of the week, I had 2 jobs, stocking shelves at a supermarket and cleaning luxury condos downtown. The condos, ironically, changed everything. They introduced me to them, the rich, the powerful, the people my family worshipped like gods. They had no idea who I was, and I didn't tell them. To them, I was invisible, just a girl in an oversized cleaning uniform with her hair tied back in a too-tight bun. And being invisible? Oh, it was beautiful. I saw everything. Affairs, secret bank accounts, hidden safes, drugs, backroom deals, marriage contracts. I watched the wealthy ruin each other quietly behind glass walls and imported marble floors. And somewhere between scrubbing kitchen counters and wiping lipstick off crystal glasses, I learned something important. Pretty people weren't powerful. Smart people were. Cold people were. Observant people were. That's when I met Elias Ryder, the man who would become my mentor, my monster, and my biggest lesson. Elias is one of the youngest real estate moguls in the city. Sharp jaw, sharper tongue, and a reputation for destroying anyone who underestimated him. His condo was the first one I was assigned to. I remember walking in and thinking, this is what heaven looks like if God was a billionaire narcissist. And he noticed me. Not in a creepy way, not in a flirting way, but in a calculating way. One night he returned early and caught me organizing his paperwork by date, instead of leaving it in the chaotic mess it always was. He raised an eyebrow. "You did that?" I thought it looked better that way, and faster to find if you need something. He studied me like I was a puzzle piece he didn't expect to find. What's your name? Harper. Last name? Dawson. The moment I said it, guilt punched me. It was still my family's name. The same people who threw me out like trash. Elias nodded slowly. "You're wasted in cleaning," he said. "Come to my office tomorrow." That moment was the start of everything. I assumed he wanted another cleaner, maybe office janitorial work. But the next day he handed me a stack of spreadsheets thicker than the Bible. He said, "Organize these. Build me a model. Show me you're not just good at sorting paper." I stayed in that office until 2 a.m. The next morning he walked in, took one look, and said, "You're hired, not as staff, as a trainee." I didn't know what that meant, but I learned fast. Elias didn't train people, he molded them, broke them, rebuilt them. He taught me finance, negotiation, reading contracts, identifying lies in people's voices. He taught me how to walk into a room silently and still make everyone feel my presence. "Power isn't loud, Harper," he'd say. "Power's when everyone shuts up the moment you breathe." He was rough, brutal, cold. But he was the only person who ever believed I could be something. And eventually I became everything he said I could be. In 10 years, I went from homeless teenager to co-owner of one of the most profitable investment firms on the East Coast. I bought penthouses, companies, stock, property. I mastered corporate warfare like it was a goddamn art form. And somewhere along the line, I grew into my face. Maybe it was confidence, maybe it was money, maybe it was the fact that I finally had access to dermatologists, stylists, and clothes that fit. I wasn't the ugly girl anymore. I wasn't even the pretty girl. I became something else. Something that made men shut their damn mouths mid-sentence when I walked by. And yet I never looked for my family, never checked their socials, never said a word to anyone about them. All that pain locked in a steel box in my chest. Until the night of the Westbrook Gala when fate decided to shove them straight back into my life. The gala was a charity event hosted by one of our biggest partners. A night of diamonds, imported champagne, gossip, and deals disguised as compliments. I walked in wearing a black satin gown with a slit high enough to silence critics and confidence sharp enough to cut glass. People turned, whispered, stared. They knew my name, Harper Ryder. I legally changed it years ago. No more Dawson. The world didn't need to know where I came from. But as I entered the marble hall, something froze the blood in my veins. A familiar voice, one I hadn't heard since the day they abandoned me. "Savannah Dawson," someone announced near the bar. And then I saw her, my sister, the golden child, the perfect one. Except she looked nothing like the idol I grew up hating. She had aged. Hard. Her smile cracked, her eyes were hollow, her blonde waves, once perfect, now looked overprocessed. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood my parents, Mom clutching a wine glass like her life depended on it, Dad pretending to be not irritated by everything around him. And then my stomach twisted. My brother, Grant, taller, broader, wearing a suit he definitely didn't pay for himself. My heart thudded painfully. 10 years. 10 years without a word. 10 years of silence. 10 years of pretending they were dead. And now they were here, in my world, my arena, my territory. I turned away immediately, but not fast enough. Savannah's eyes locked onto me. Confusion. Recognition. Disbelief. Her lips parted. "No way," she whispered. And then louder, "Harper!" Head snapped in my direction, my pulse doubled. 1,000 memories ricocheted inside me. Insults, laughter, humiliation, abandonment. I took a slow breath, lifted my chin, and faced the family who destroyed me. "Hello," I said coolly. Savannah covered her mouth. "Harper! Oh my God, I can't believe it's you." My mother blinked rapidly, like I was a ghost she'd expected to stay dead. "You look different," she muttered. My dad stared like he was trying to solve a math problem he couldn't understand. Grant smirked. "Damn, money really can't fix anything." And that was the moment something inside me clicked. Not anger, not sadness, but power. Pure, cold power. I smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but with the precision of a woman who knew she held all the cards now. "It's been a long time," I said, "and I'm surprised to see all of you here." "We were invited," Mom snapped too quickly. "We're close with the Westbrooks." That was a lie. An obvious one. Savannah grabbed my arm. "Harper, can we talk, please? It's important." No, it wasn't. Nothing they wanted would ever be important to me. But the desperation in her voice, that was interesting. I tilted my head. Maybe later. I walked away, leaving them stunned. People stepped aside as I passed. Whispers floated behind me. Who was that woman? She's incredible. Is she on the board? She runs the writer group, I think. My family heard every word. I made sure of it. And when I glanced back over my shoulder, their expressions said it all. They finally.
When Elias stepped onto that stage and said, "She's finally here," the entire ballroom shifted like someone had sucked the air out of the room. And for one insane second, I thought he was calling out some other woman, maybe an investor arriving late or some billionaire's spoiled daughter swooping in for attention. But no, his eyes were pinned on me, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment to detonate the bomb he'd been constructing behind my back. And suddenly, the chandelier lights felt too bright and the crowd too close, and every insecurity I'd buried under 10 years of success tried clawing back to the surface. People swiveled in their seats, whispering my name like it was something forbidden. Who is she? Why her? Is that his partner? Is she the reason he broke off that merger last month? The rumors spun fast, faster than I could breathe, and there I was, Harper Dawson, formerly the ugly girl no one wanted in photos, now being stared at like I was the damn plot twist of the year. Elias let the silence stretch, the kind of silence only powerful men know how to control, the kind that turns a room into a chessboard, and he waited until almost every gaze latched onto me before continuing. 10 years ago, he said into the mic with that cool, rich bastard tone that made CEOs sweet, I met someone who was underestimated, discarded, ignored, and tonight she stands in this room not because of privilege, not because of family, but because she built herself from the ground up. Ladies and gentlemen, Harper Ryder. There it was, my name, my new name, spoken like a damned coronation. The applause was automatic, polite, curious, unsure, but all I could feel was fire crawling up my spine because my family was in this room. My family who threw me out. My family who told me I was worthless. My family who hadn't seen me since I left with a ripped suitcase and $87. They were listening to the man who saved me paint me like some miracle he'd discovered in a gutter. Savannah's face had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth like she might actually throw up. My mother blinked rapidly, her wine glass trembling just enough that I noticed even from across the ballroom. Dad just stared, expressionless but rigid, like his spine was carved out of concrete instead of flesh. Grant scoffed, leaned back, and muttered something to his date, probably a cheap insult, probably still thinking he was the clever one in the family. I didn't look away. I met their stares head-on, chin lifted, heart pounding so loud it felt like a drumline in my ribs. Elias continued speaking about the foundation and the mission and the funding drives and all the typical billionaire gala bullshit, but I barely absorbed it because I knew absolutely nothing he did tonight was unplanned. Elias didn't breathe unless it was strategic. And that meant one thing. My family being here wasn't a coincidence. He wanted them here. He brought them here. But why? After the speech, the lights were turned, the music started, waiters drifted like swans with champagne flutes, and I tried to slip into the crowd before Elias could corner me, but the man had the annoying skill of appearing exactly where you didn't want him. "You look like you're about to bolt," he murmured behind me. I turned sharply. He was close. Too close. Tall, unfairly handsome in that ruthless corporate way, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than the car I used to sleep in. "You didn't tell me they'd be here," I hissed. He didn't blink. "Would you have come if I did?" "Hell no." Exactly. That infuriated me. "You don't get to play God with my trauma, Elias." His jaw ticked, but his voice stayed low and even. "You've avoided this for 10 years. I'm not letting them control you anymore." "They don't control me." "Then say hello without shaking." My stomach dropped, because he wasn't wrong. My hands trembled slightly, and the fact that he noticed pissed me off even more. I pulled myself up straighter, squared my shoulders, and forced my voice to steady. "I don't owe them anything. I didn't say you did, but they want something from you." That hit like ice water. "What?" His lips curved into that infuriating half smirk he used whenever he was about to throw me into the deep end on purpose. Why don't you ask them? And then he walked off, just like that, leaving me standing there with my pulse in my throat and a storm in my chest. But he wasn't wrong. My family kept glancing at me like they were waiting for permission to approach, like they were scared, which was delicious in a dark, twisted way. So I took a breath, exhaled the last fragments of the girl they once humiliated, and walked straight toward them. Savannah stepped forward instantly. "Harper," she breathed, her voice shaky. "Oh my God, you're really alive?" I said coldly. "Yes, shocking, I know. I learned how to eat without parental approval." Mom winced like I'd slapped her. "There's no need for hostility." "There is," I said, smiling sweetly. Dad cleared his throat, always pretending to be the rational one. "We were hoping to speak with you privately. It's important." I laughed. Actually laughed. "No." "Harper, please," Savannah whispered, her eyes glassy like she was on the verge of tears. Things aren't good right now." "So what?" I said bluntly. "So you're unhappy, so now I matter?" Grant stepped in, rolling his eyes. "Can you drop the attitude? You're acting like you're some badass villain." "I am," I said. "You made me one." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Mom finally spoke, her voice brittle. "We didn't come here to fight. We came because you're broke," I interrupted. All three of them froze. Savannah's face crumpled. "Who told you?" "No one. I just know your tells." Dad's jaw clenched. "Our situation is temporary." "No, it's not," I said softly. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be here begging for my attention like stray dogs looking for scraps." "Harper," Mom snapped, "don't speak to us like—" "Like what?" I said. "Like you spoke to me?" That shut her up. For the first time in my life, she had no pre-scripted insult ready, nothing to weaponize. Just silence. Savannah stepped closer, tears threatening to fall. "Harper, we're going to lose the house." "Which one?" I asked sweetly. "The beach one?" Her lips trembled. "All of them." That actually shocked me. My family loved money more than they loved air. Losing one property would have been embarrassing. Losing all of them? Unthinkable. "How?" I demanded. Dad swallowed hard. "A bad investment. A partner screwed us. We were promised returns that never came. Everything collapsed." I almost laughed. "You got scammed." Wow. Irony's alive tonight. Mom's voice cracked. "We didn't know who else to turn to." "Then turn around," I said. "I'm not your emergency fund." Savannah's tears finally spilled. "Harper, please, I know we hurt you. I know we were horrible, but we need help." I stared at her. The sister who used to lock me out of the bathroom so she could film beauty tutorials. The sister who told boys at school I looked contagious. The sister who laughed when our mom threw out my clothes because ugly shouldn't accessorize. And now she wanted salvation. From me. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to need me now." I turned to walk away, and then Dad grabbed my wrist. Hard. My blood boiled instantly. Elias materialized out of nowhere, like he sensed something was wrong. "Is there a problem?" he said sharply. Dad released me. "This is a private family matter." "No," Elias said, stepping between us. "It isn't." Savannah sniffed. "We just need a loan. Something small. Something to stabilize things." "Define small," Elias said with an icy smile. Dad hesitated. Eight million." "Million!" I barked. What did you do?" "It's complicated," Mom snapped. "No," I said. "It's stupid." And then she lost it. "We raised you. We fed you. I abandoned you!" I screamed before I could stop myself. Conversations around us halted. Music softened. The entire ballroom suddenly had front row seats to our family implosion. "You threw me out at 18 because I wasn't pretty enough for your standards. You humiliated me, ignored me, treated me like trash. And now you want a loan?" Mom's face twisted. "You wouldn't have survived if we didn't teach you tough love." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't teach me shit. The world did." Dad stepped forward, voice cold. "If you don't help us, we'll lose everything." "Good," I said. Their faces fell simultaneously. Even I felt a tiny sting in my chest, but I ignored it. I waited 10 years for an apology they never gave, and now they wanted money instead. "We're done," I whispered. "All of us." And I walked away. But Elias followed me, grabbing my arm gently. "Harper, don't," I snapped. "You did this." "And I'd do it again," he said. "You needed to face them." No, I growled. I needed peace. This isn't peace. They're hiding something, he quietly said. Something big. I froze. What? They didn't just lose money, he said. They're involved with someone dangerous. My heart slammed against my ribs. Who? Elias's jaw tightened. A man named Vincent Hale. My blood went cold. Vincent Hale was not just dangerous, he was lethal. A billionaire with a reputation for making people disappear. Why would my family be involved with him? I whispered. Elias's voice dropped. Because Vincent Hale is looking for you. The world tilted. Me? Why? I don't know, he said. But your family didn't show up here for help. They showed up because Hale sent them. My throat closed. Suddenly, everything made sense. The desperation, the fear in their eyes, the urgency. Someone dangerous wanted me, and they were here to hand me over. Elias, I whispered, what does he want from me? I think... Elias hesitated, which he never did, and it terrified me. I think it has something to do with your past, something your family never told you. I stared at him, heart racing, breath shaking. What past? He stepped closer. Harper, you weren't abandoned because you were ugly. They got rid of you because your existence threatens someone powerful. My world shattered. What the hell are you talking about? Elias's expression was grim. Your family didn't disown you. They hid you. Hide me from what? Not what, he said. Who? And before I could speak, someone screamed from across the ballroom. People scattered. A woman shouted, "Call security!" I whipped around just in time to see two men dragging Savannah out a side door. My stomach dropped. Savannah! Elias grabbed my arm. Harper, don't! But it was too late. My past had
The moment Vincent Hale's smirk burned into my vision, the air in the ballroom turned toxic, like someone had opened a bottle of poison gas, and every breath I took threatened to suffocate me, my heart hammering so loud I was certain the whole gala could hear it. And before I could even react, Elias had my hand in his grip and was dragging me through the chaos of screaming waiters, overturned champagne flutes, and guests stumbling over their gowns, shouting questions we couldn't answer fast enough. And I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that Savannah had been taken not because of a random threat, but because Vincent had waited 10 long years for me to rise, to reclaim the life they thought I'd never have. And now he wanted to remind me that I was still just a pawn in a game I had barely begun to understand. And as we exited through the side doors into the alley behind the gala, the winter wind biting through my gown, Elias whispered, "He knows about the investment files, Harper. Your family's collapse wasn't accidental." I froze, the icy air mingling with the fire in my veins, my mind racing back 10 years to the first night I was abandoned, to every humiliation and every silent promise I made to myself while shivering on the streets. And I realized that Vincent's interest in my family was not about pity or loyalty. It was about leverage, revenge, and secrets buried deeper than I had imagined. And I wanted to scream at them, at my parents, at Savannah, for bringing this darkness back into my life. But Elias shook his head sharply, pulling me into a shadowed alcove where he could finally explain, his voice low and sharp, Hale isn't just a businessman. He's a predator who collects people and debts and secrets. Your family owes him more than money. He doesn't forget. And now you're the reason they can't pay. My stomach lurched, bile rising if I imagined the horrors Vincent could inflict, my family cowering under his wrath. And then the anger hit, pure and uncontrollable, because for 10 years I had fought tooth and nail to be someone, to own my power, and now the same people who threw me away had dragged me into the pit of their mistakes, like I owed them salvation, like I had ever owed them anything. And I realized at that moment I had a choice. Run and hide as they had always wanted me to, or step into the fire and make them regret every second they ever called me ugly, every insult, every abandonment, every betrayal. And I looked at Elias, who nodded once, silently, as if confirming that he already knew my decision, and together we ran, weaving through narrow alleys, dodging streetlights that flickered like warnings, until we reached a sleek black SUV parked inconspicuously behind a row of high-end boutiques, the kind of car that screamed money without needing to. And Elias opened the door, gesturing me in, and the moment I sat, he whispered, "They're testing you, Harper. Vincent doesn't just want you scared, he wants you broken. But I promise you, he underestimates you." My hands shook, not from cold, but from adrenaline and the raw surge of emotions I had buried for a decade. Fear, anger, humiliation, and a hunger for justice I didn't fully realize had consumed me until now. And as the SUV rolled through the city streets, lights reflecting off skyscrapers like shards of broken glass, I thought about my parents, Savannah, Grant, and everything they had taken from me. And suddenly it became clear. I was no longer the girl who had cried over thrift store dresses or sat alone on a curb. I was the woman who could destroy them and everyone who wronged me, elegantly, without mercy, with the precision that only 10 years of pain, calculation, and training could forge. And Elias finally spoke again, his tone almost gentle for the first time. We have 24 hours. 24 hours to find your sister before Hale decides she's not just leverage, she's collateral. My stomach flipped violently, a sick mixture of panic and fury, and I thought about Savannah, terrified, probably whispering my name in the darkness, and I felt a surge of protective wrath I hadn't known I possessed, my mind racing through possibilities, allies, traps, and manipulations, the city passing in a blur outside the tinted windows, a dangerous game of cat and mouse. And I realized that this night would mark the beginning of a reckoning so thorough, so complete, that everyone who had ever underestimated me would crumble. And yet beneath the rage, a bitter ache lingered, a fragile thread of sorrow that tied me back to the girl who had been a thrown away, the girl who had never had a family to rely on. And I clenched my fists so tight it hurt and whispered, more to myself than Elias, I won't lose her, not again. The SUV stopped abruptly in front of an abandoned warehouse on the riverfront, the kind of place people whispered about after dark, and Elias gestured for me to follow him inside. And as we stepped over broken glass and rusted chains, I realized that everything I had learned about manipulation, reading people, and power was about to be tested against the deadliest predator I had ever imagined, Vincent Hale. And my mind raced through possibilities, imagining him in tailored suits with that smug, dangerous smile, calculating every move we might make. And I felt the weight of 10 years of neglect, abandonment, and betrayal pressing against me, fueling the fire. And Elias stopped in a shadowed corner, pressing a small tablet into my hands, showing me live surveillance footage of Savannah tied to a chair, looking terrified, crying, and at that moment, something inside me snapped, rage so pure, it burned through the fear. And I realized that Vincent underestimated not just my intelligence, not just my power, but my love for my sister. And I swore to myself that I would not leave that warehouse without her, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter the dark secrets my family had kept from me for so long. And I started formulating a plan, calculating moves, considering allies, traps, and manipulations, all the lessons Elias had drilled into me for 10 years. And as I did, Elias's voice cut softly through my storm of thoughts. Harper, this is your moment. The girl they called ugly, this is when she becomes unstoppable. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse slam in my ears, my hands shaking both from fear and exhalation, and I looked at the tablet again, seeing my sister, seeing my family's betrayal, and 1,000 dark plans forming in my mind, each one more precise, more devastating than the last. And I knew that by sunrise, everything would change forever, because Vincent Hale had just stumbled into the one person he had miscalculated, the one person who would turn every trick, every threat, every secret against him. And as the warehouse door creaked behind us, signaling someone or something approaching, I realized that the battle for Savannah, for justice, and for the reckoning my family never thought possible had begun. And I whispered under my breath, teeth clenched, heart hammering, let him come. Let him see what the ugly girl can do. And just then, a shadow moved in the corner of the warehouse and a familiar, chilling voice echoed, "So you're the one they call Harper. I've been waiting a long time for this." Vincent Hale's presence in that warehouse made the air itself feel heavy, thick with menace, the kind of aura that pressed against your chest and made your lungs fight for air, and I stared at him, my pulse thundering like a war drum, every muscle in my body taut, my mind running through every lesson Elias had drilled into me for the past 10 years, every betrayal I had endured, every insult and abandonment that had made me the woman standing here now. And I realized in that instant that Vincent wasn't just testing me, he was taunting me, daring me to show weakness. And I refused. I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and let the calm I had spent a decade forging around me like armor radiate through my voice when I said, "You've waited a long time, Vincent. Congratulations. I'm here." And he laughed, low and predatory, the sound crawling under my skin like a swarm of vipers. and he held out the envelope in one perfectly manicured hand, the paper crisp, the writing elegant but sinister. And I knew instinctively that inside was the proof of every lie, every debt, every manipulation my family had been tangled in, and I didn't reach for it. I wanted to see the fear flicker in his eyes first. And Vincent tilted his head, studying me as if he had all the time in the world, and then he said, "I've watched you grow, Harper Dawson. Watched you claw your way out of the gutter your parents tossed you into. Watched you become impressive. But impressive isn't enough. Not when I want something." I clenched my fists, anger boiling hot, rage so pure it felt like fire licking my bones. And I said through gritted teeth, "You don't want anything from me. You want to terrorize my family, and that ends tonight." And the words barely left my mouth before the warehouse lights flickered, plunging half of the room into shadows. And I realized I had no idea how many men he had there, hidden in corners, ready to strike. And yet, despite the fear, I felt a surge of clarity, a sharp, delicious rush of control, because for 10 years I had trained my mind, built it into a weapon sharper than any knife, and I would use it now. And Elias stepped beside me, calm, collected, a living shield, his eyes never leaving Vincent's, and I whispered, "What's the play?" And he shook his head slightly, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Let him underestimate you." And that's when the first man lunged, fast and silent, a shadow in the darkness, and I reacted without thinking, grabbing a chain hanging from the ceiling and swinging it, knocking the man into a stack of crates with a satisfying crash. And before he could get up, Elias had him pinned to the ground, voice low and deadly. "Try that again and you die." And I felt a surge of exhilaration I hadn't known I could feel. The thrill of confrontation mixed with 10 years of pent-up fury and betrayal. And then Vincent clapped slowly, mockingly from across the warehouse. "Impressive, but it won't be enough." And I realized that he wasn't here just to intimidate. He wanted to play, wanted to push every limit, and I would give him a fight he would never forget. And I lunged forward, using every tactic Elias had taught me, striking with precision, moving with speed, turning the warehouse into a battlefield. Each step calculated, each motion deadly. And Vincent's smile never wavered, just grew because he knew I was exactly the kind of opponent he relished, the one who would rise from pain and fear and turn it back on him. And as I kicked another man into the shadows, I caught a glimpse of Savannah, her eyes wide with terror, but alive, and I felt a surge of protective fury that gave me wings. And then Vincent spoke, his voice calm and terrifying. "You could save her, Harper. One wrong move, and she's gone." And my stomach dropped, bile rising, but I didn't hesitate, I didn't falter. I felt 10 years of rage, grief, abandonment, and survival condense into one sharp edge of focus, and I hissed, "Try me." And from that moment on, every move became a dance of shadows, steel, and strategy. Every punch, every block, every feint, a calculated step toward dismantling him, dismantling the illusion of power he had tried to cast over me. And as each passing second, I realized something dark and delicious. I was no longer just Harper Dawson, the girl my parents abandoned, the ugly girl, the powerless girl. I was the storm they never saw coming, the fury that would consume everyone who ever thought they could control me. And I cornered Vincent near the far wall, eyes blazing, every inch of my body humming with lethal intent, and he grinned that same smug, infuriating grin, raising his hands mockingly, as if to say, "Go on. Try." And I did, moving with precision only years of pain, rejection, and ambition could create. And every strike, every maneuver pushed him back, shattered his smug composure, until finally he paused. For the first time, visibly impressed and startled, and I could see the calculation in his eyes, realizing perhaps too late that I was not just a woman, but a force, a reckoning, a living embodiment of every insult and abandonment he could never touch. And as the fight continued, my mind raced, plotting the next moves, preparing for contingencies, checking every exit, every shadow, every potential threat. And suddenly, I saw the envelope fall from his hand, fluttering to the ground as if fate itself was giving me a gift. And without breaking stride, I kicked it toward myself, snatched it, and ripped it open, eyes scanning the contents, heart hammering. And the words, the figures, the documents, the evidence of corruption, manipulation, threats, it was everything. A treasure trove of secrets that could ruin Vincent Hale, save my family, and exact vengeance on the people who had abandoned me, all in one brilliant, terrifying moment. And I realized the scale of what I held, the power finally in my hands. And Vincent roared in fury, lunging again, but I was ready, meeting his charge with a mix of brute force, precision, and rage. And then Elias shouted from behind, "Go, now!" And I grabbed Savannah, pulling her behind me, and for the
the first time in a decade, I felt my family, well, part of it, safe, alive, and in my control. And I ran toward the exit, Vincent and his men crashing behind us, the warehouse lights flickering, shadows stretching, the sound of glass breaking and shouts filling the air. And as I burst outside into the night air, freezing wind whipping around us, city lights twinkling in the distance like cold stars, I realized the full weight of what I had just done, what I had just become. And the thrill, the fear, the exhilaration, the fury, they all surged together in one perfect storm. And for a moment, I let myself breathe, let myself feel alive, truly alive, for the first time since the day they kicked me out. And yet in that moment of triumph, a cold thought pierced my heart. Vincent Hale wasn't done, not by a long shot. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, he was already planning the next move, already calculating how to turn this back on me. And I knew in my bones, in the fire of my veins, that the next confrontation would be deadlier, more personal, and I was ready. And as I looked at Elias, at Savannah, at the city skyline shimmering under the moonlight, I whispered fiercely, "Let him come. Let him see the full storm Harper Dawson can unleash." And the distant sound of a sleek engine starting, a shadow moving on a rooftop across the river, reminded me that Vincent Hale was already there, watching, waiting, and plotting. And I knew in my bones, in the fire of my veins, that the next confrontation would be deadlier, more personal, and I was ready.
The text burned in my hand like ice and fire at the same time. 12 hours. 12 hours to untangle a mess I had spent 10 years preparing for. 12 hours to save my family from a predator they had tangled with long before I was even aware of the darkness lurking in their lives. And I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air as I stared down at Savannah, whose wide, terrified eyes mirrored the fear I had once known but had long since buried under a decade of steel-forged confidence. And I knew I had to act fast, to think faster, to become a storm of precision and calculated chaos. Because Vincent Hale wasn't just dangerous, he was methodical, brilliant, and ruthless. And if he had any inkling of my capabilities, he would have been planning contingencies for months, if not years. And yet that didn't scare me. It ignited me. And Elias, ever calm, stood beside me, his hand brushing against mine like a silent anchor. And I felt my pulse steady, my mind sharpening, the way a blade sharpens itself when hammered against fire and stone. And I realized we had leverage now, the envelope full of documents, evidence, and secrets that could topple empires and ruin people who thought themselves untouchable. And I started mapping everything in my mind, possible safe houses, known allies, contacts who owed Elias favors, everything I had learned in the 10 years since they cast me aside like garbage. And I realized the cruel poetry of it all. My parents had tried to erase me, but the very knowledge of my existence, the very life I had clawed back, had become the weapon that could save them. If only they weren't so blind, so weak, so foolishly dependent on the man who had terrorized them. And I felt anger flare, hot and bright, as I thought of the countless nights I had cried alone on cold streets, of every humiliation Savannah had inflicted, every mocking laugh, every whispered insult, every manipulation my parents had cloaked as concern. And now, in this moment, I could almost taste the justice that would come from turning the tables. But first we had to move, had to act, had to get Savannah to safety before Vincent realized that the documents were no longer under his control. And I felt a flash of dread because even with everything we had, I knew he would be relentless, merciless, and infinitely cruel. And yet in that fear, I found clarity, purpose, and an almost addictive thrill at the thought of finally facing him head on, of showing him that the ugly girl he never noticed, the girl my family disowned, had not only survived, but had become unstoppable. And we moved through the city like ghosts, silent, deliberate, every step measured, every shadow observed. Elias leading the way to a safe house stocked with tech, security, and weapons, all prepared for contingencies like this. And I felt a surge of gratitude and tension as we slipped inside, barricaded doors, checked cameras, and finally allowed ourselves a moment to breathe. Only to have the phone buzz again. Another text, this time from a number I recognized immediately because the writing style was deliberate, confident, and cruelly familiar. Did you really think you could outsmart me? She's already mine if you don't act. My stomach dropped, bile rising, and I realized instantly that Vincent had set another trap, that Savannah's life, the very thing I had fought to secure, was still hanging by a thread. and rage exploded in my chest, raw, blinding, almost consuming. And I clenched my fists, teeth grinding, because for 10 years I had lived with rage and fear, and now it was time to wield it as a weapon, to become the instrument of reckoning. And I turned to Elias, who nodded, understanding every nuance of my silent fury, and we mapped our next move. Cross-referencing surveillance, city blueprints, every known Vincent Hale property. And I realized that the man we were up against was brilliant, but predictable in his arrogance, always assuming his prey would be weak, frightened, pliable. And for the first time, I smiled, cruel, knowing that he had underestimated me again, the same way my family had underestimated me for 10 years. And I decided to hit him where it hurt. To use the documents, not just as leverage, but as bait, as a trap, knowing he couldn't resist protecting his secrets. And the thrill of the plan sent shivers down my spine, sharp, intoxicating, as I felt all my years of survival, humiliation, and struggle condense into pure, sharp focus. And we left the safe house just as night fell, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, the river reflecting neon colors, and every sense was alive, every nerve on edge, because we had only one shot to save Savannah, to strike back at Vincent, to turn the predator into prey. And as we approached one of his known warehouses, I could see shadows moving, lights flickering, and I whispered under my breath, teeth clenched, "This ends tonight." And Elias placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. But I knew the final confrontation was mine to control, mine to wield like a blade. And we entered silently, using the darkness as our ally. The only sounds, our breaths, and the faint hum of security systems. And then a single beam of light cut across the floor. And Vincent stepped from the shadows, perfectly composed, smiling that same infuriating grin, and my blood ran cold and hot at once. Fear mingling with excitement, rage, and the irresistible pull of reckoning. And he clapped slowly, mockingly. Ah, Harper Ryder, finally taking charge. But I warned you, you can't outrun me, you can't outthink me, and you can't protect her. My heart froze at his words, every instinct screaming danger, yet every fiber of my being also screamed defiance, fury, and strategy. And I stepped forward, voice steady despite the quake in my chest. "Try me, Vincent. You've underestimated me the last time." The air vibrated with tension, so thick it felt almost tangible, like electricity before a storm. And I could see in his eyes the slightest flicker of surprise, the tiniest crack in his armor, and it was all the confirmation I needed that my plan was working, that my years of survival, humiliation, and patient revenge were converging into this single shattering moment. And I felt the rush of control, of imminent justice, the intoxicating mix of fear and empowerment as I took another step. Closing the distance, ready to strike, ready to reclaim everything stolen from me, when a sudden metallic click echoed behind me, and I froze, spinning just in time to see another figure emerge from the shadows, tall, broad, familiar, and my breath caught in my throat as recognition slammed into me like a freight train. It was Grant, my brother, smirking, a gun casually held in his hand. And I realized in that instant that my family's betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined, that not only Vincent, but my own blood was willing to play against me. And fury, shock, and disbelief collided inside me, heart hammering as I whispered, "You?" And Grant chuckled, low, dangerous, eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "Surprised? Didn't think I'd show up, did you?" My mind raced, scanning possibilities, calculating moves, anticipating responses, and I realized with sharp, bitter clarity that the next moments would decide everything. Savannah's life, my family's fate, and whether the girl they called ugly would finally rise unbroken, unshakable, unstoppable. And as I clenched my jaw, feeling the years of rage, pain, and ambition condense into pure, sharp focus, I knew that whatever happened next would change all of us forever. The gunshot echoed like thunder in the vast warehouse, reverberating through steel beams and crates, a sound that made my heart seize in my chest, the metallic taste of fear instantly filling my mouth. And for a fraction of a second, everything froze. The shadows, the light, the chaos, the predator,
my family, my sister. But then instinct kicked in. Years of survival, rage, and cunning converging into one sharp, undeniable clarity. And I lunged forward, dragging Savannah behind a stack of crates just as another figure fell to the ground, blood blooming across his designer shirt. Grant's smug grin morphing into something darker, a mix of fury and panic. And I realized in that split second that betrayal ran thicker than blood in this family, that Vincent Hale had orchestrated everything, using every weakness, every lie, every secret. And now even my own brother was a weapon against me. And I felt a surge of hatred so pure, it burned hotter than the adrenaline surging through my veins. A burning determination that I would not allow anyone, not my family, not Vincent, not Grant, to decide the terms of my life or my sister's. And as I glanced at Elias, who had flanked us silently, expression grim but calm, I knew we had one chance, one perfect, sharp strike to turn the tables and reclaim control over a chaos 10 years in the making. And I whispered under my breath, "Hold on, Savannah, I've got you." And she clutched my arm, trembling, tears streaking down her face, the fear raw and palpable. And it cut me deeper than any insult, any betrayal, any abandonment ever had, because I had spent 10 years imagining this moment, imagining her safe in my arms. And now the stakes were higher, the danger deadlier, the emotional weight crushing. But I refused to falter, refused to let Vincent, my parents, or Grant see weakness. And I felt the years of ridicule and pain condense into one burning, unstoppable focus. A mental clarity that made every movement precise, every calculation perfect, every heartbeat aligned with purpose. And I scanned the warehouse, shadows hiding men, light casting angles that could conceal a gun, a knife, a trap. And I realized that Vincent's arrogance would be his undoing, because he underestimated the one thing he could never predict, the ferocity of a girl who had clawed her way from nothing to everything, the brilliance of a mind honed by betrayal and survival, and the raw, unyielding force of love for the sister he threatened. And I devised a plan on the fly, voice low to Elias. We lure Vincent in, corner him, use the documents as bait, and trap him. I take Grant separately, Savannah stays with you. And he nodded, eyes narrowing, approving, knowing I had transformed from the girl who cried over rejection to a strategist, a warrior, a predator. And I felt the thrill and weight of that metamorphosis pulse through me, adrenaline dancing along my nerves as we split, shadows swallowing us like allies, the warehouse suddenly a labyrinth of steel and threat. And then Vincent's voice slithered through the darkness, smooth, predatory. "Ah, Harper, clever girl. Trying to outthink me? Don't make me laugh." And I let him believe I was retreating, weaving silently through the shadows, Savannah trembling against me, until the perfect moment arrived, and then I struck, using a rope to swing down from a catwalk, feet connecting with Vincent's chest, sending him stumbling back against crates, the sound sharp, delicious, and the fight ignited like a fuse, a flurry of motion, every second a battle of wits and reflexes, every move calculated, every strike precise. And Vincent, for all his confidence, faltered, blinked, underestimated my speed, my knowledge of the warehouse, the years I had spent building my mind into a weapon. And for the first time, his grin cracked, just slightly, just enough for me to know I had him exactly where I wanted. And then Grant appeared, weapon raised, moving to intercept me, and I spun, catching him with a brutal elbow to the ribs, sending him sprawling into crates. And my heart clenched at the necessity of it, the betrayal of family cutting deeper than anything Vincent could ever inflict. And I knew then that my parents' weakness, their lifelong obsession with money, power, and appearances, had almost cost everything. But I refused to let that define the ending of this story, and I pivoted back to Vincent, who had recovered, eyes blazing, fury twisting his features, and he lunged, and the fight became a blur of motion, steel and cunning, every punch, kick, block, and throw a testament to 10 years of survival, every maneuver a dance of revenge, fear, and liberation. And I could see the terror begin to flicker in his eyes, the first crack in the armor of a man who thought himself untouchable. And I realized with fierce joy that he had finally met his match, that the ugly girl he ignored and the family that disowned me had unknowingly forged a weapon capable of toppling empires. And then, just as Vincent reached for the documents, I kicked him back hard into a wall, sending a crate toppling over him, the sound deafening, the paper scattering across the concrete floor like snow. And I dove for them, Elias covering my blind side, and Savannah, clutching my hand, watched with wide, terrified eyes. And I felt the full magnitude of the moment, the culmination of fear, rage, cunning, and love. And I whispered fiercely, "It ends tonight." And then Vincent roared, lunging again, but this time I had set the trap, luring him toward a narrow section of the warehouse lined with security cameras and a reinforced cage. And as he stepped inside, I pulled the lever, a heavy metal door slammed shut, the sound final, the vibration reverberating in my chest. And for the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes, true, visceral fear, as he realized he had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outclassed by the very girl he had spent a decade underestimating. And then I turned to Grant, who was struggling to his feet, groaning from the force of my earlier strike, and I advanced slowly, deliberately, my presence alone a silent declaration of judgment. And he flinched, realization dawning too late that his arrogance and betrayal had placed him in the path of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to claim. And I whispered, sharp and cutting, "You thought you could manipulate me, betray me, and control the outcome, but you forgot one thing. I don't play by your rules." And then without hesitation, I disarmed him, holding him at gunpoint, heart hammering with adrenaline and dark satisfaction. And I felt a strange, bitter pang as I realized that all the power dynamics of my past, the ridicule, the abandonment, the name-calling, the humiliation, had led me here, transforming the girl they once mocked into a force capable of enacting justice, not blindly, not emotionally, but with cold precision, calculated fury, and unflinching resolve. And I finally stepped back toward Vincent, watching him struggle against the cage, a smirk playing on his lips only briefly before fading into fear. And I felt the culmination of every insult, every slight, every betrayal crystallize into pure, unstoppable power. And I whispered to him, calm and deadly, "This is what happens when you underestimate the girl they called ugly." And Vincent's eyes widened, the grin gone, replaced by a chilling recognition that his era of control, manipulation, and terror was over, at least for now, and I felt an unexpected rush of triumph, tinged with emotion, because for 10 years I had been dismissed, discarded, and disbelieved. And now every one of those years had led to this moment of undeniable justice. And I turned to Elias, who nodded, acknowledging the precision, control, and emotional mastery I had wielded. And then I finally turned to Savannah, tears streaming down her face, trembling, but alive. And I pulled her close, holding her tighter than I had ever held anyone, whispering, "It's over. I've got you." And she clutched me, shaking, sobbing, and I felt a bittersweet ache because while the battle was won, the scars of the past 10 years, the betrayals, the humiliations, the loneliness were indelible. Yet I felt stronger for them, honed, sharpened, and infinitely more powerful. And as my parents stumbled into the warehouse moments later, eyes wide, faces pale, disbelief written across every line, I felt no need to be gentle, no need to console, only to assert the truth that had taken a decade to forge. And I said, voice steady and sharp, "This is what happens when you abandon someone, when you mock them, when you leave them to die in the shadows. You lose the right to control, to lecture, to manipulate." And they faltered, finally tasting fear, finally realizing that the girl they called ugly, the daughter they disowned, the sister they ignored, had become the arbiter of justice, the orchestrator of their reckoning. And I felt a thrill of the poetic symmetry of it all, every insult, every betrayal, every cruel word coming back to meet them, but tempered with mercy because the woman I had become was not a monster, just a force of nature with eyes wide open. And I finally exhaled, Savannah still in my arms, Elias beside me, Vincent trapped and furious, Grant subdued and powerless. And I realized for the first time that I was free. Truly free, the weight of humiliation, fear, and abandonment lifted, replaced with empowerment, clarity, and the knowledge that justice had finally been served, not blindly, not haphazardly, but with precision, foresight, and emotion. And I whispered to Savannah one last time, voice soft but firm, "We survived. We rise, and they can never touch us again." And she clung to me, shaking and sobbing at once, a sound so pure it made my heart ache. And in that moment, I knew that the girl they once mocked was gone, replaced by a woman who had not only survived, but conquered. And as the sirens of the city rose in the distance, signaling the arrival of the authorities called by Elias to handle the aftermath, I felt the culmination of 10 years of pain, struggle, and survival crystallize into a profound, unshakable victory. And I knew deep in my bones that this night marked